Today we are focusing on some other security recommendations around other pieces of hardware from email, physical hardware and infrastructure, as well as some good processes and documentation that you can be putting in place around security. Get additional email filtration and protection systems in place for your email. Some of these email systems already have some basic filters already out of the box that can control what emails come in to your network. But put in further email filtration systems. You've probably got servers out on your fleet. Those getting backed up is great. Make sure that you get your email systems also backed up regularly. Whether you've got on-premise email, such as something like Exchange, get that backed up. But if you do have cloud-based email, such as the G Suite, the Google Suite, or the Office 365 suite up in the cloud, get backup systems in place. Control and disable certain attachment types on emails. Attachments such as executable files. Files that can be double-clicked from an attachment. Somebody may not even know what that attachment is if they double-click on it, and they introduce malicious software into your network. Look at disabling URLs, hyperlinks in emails themselves. If an email is sent with a link, somebody clicks on that link, you don't know where it's going. It may say www.microsoft.com, but in the back end, it's actually going to some malicious website. You don't even know. Secure your server room access, your comms cabinet access, your data center access. You don't want your servers, your switches, your network equipment just sitting in the corner of an office outside of any sort of protection. Anybody could just walk around, get access to it, take things out, introduce things into your network you don't want. Have those in a cabinet. Have that cabinet locked. Hardware that is end of life should be decommissioned. Hardware that is end of life is no longer under support. Parts often cannot be acquired from the vendor. So if you have parts that fail, you can no longer get it. As well as that, the hardware itself does have software loaded onto it, such as firmware, that can no longer be updated because the hardware vendor no longer supplies that software for that hardware. So hardware that is now end of life should be replaced with hardware that is within life. Look at controlling your mobile devices. So let's talk about mobile phones and tablets, those sort of things. If you want people to be able to use their own personal phone to be able to install your email, your corporate company email, that's fine, but put proper controls in place to be able to manage and control that. Further to that, you can actually have mobile device management. They're called MDM solutions in place to control your entire suite. Look at systems. You can actually put security profiles directly into devices. You can remote wipe devices if they get stolen, to lack from data from being breached out of your business. But look at controlling your mobile devices. Ensure that your hardware and your infrastructure assets are securely disposed. So often people just throw out old hardware, throw out old desktops and laptops straight into the bin. They end up in landfill, and anywhere from your office to that landfill, and even in landfill, anybody can just get access to it. They could be sold off to wherever, and they still contain your data on the hard drives. The hard drives will contain your data that you do not want to get breached out into the world. So put systems in place to securely wipe that data. You can organize with third-party companies to do this. You can have shredders that can actually destroy the data adequately. Ensure that all of your assets, your hardware and your infrastructure is tracked and controlled through some sort of asset management system. You want to know where your hardware is at all times, who the hardware is allocated to, if it's physically in this building, in what size of the building, if it's located in a particular data center. You want to have perhaps barcode system with your name on it, something that is easily trackable, that if I go and have a look at any piece of infrastructure, I can see a code on there, I can look up that code and I know exactly what that is, where it is, who it's located, who it's assigned to as well. Across all of your hardware and infrastructure, get some sort of a legal notice to be displayed on the screen before somebody logs in. This could be your end user computers, this could be your servers, this could be you accessing a switch. As soon as somebody logs in, or at least turns it on, they're prompted with a security warning that says, by using this system, you are agreeing to our acceptable use policy. Any breach of this will have XY consequences. Get that in place so that anybody who accesses any system, any infrastructure piece of system in your organization is well aware of the risk, so that if they do breach any IT accessible use policy, they should have known better. Ensure that your hardware firmware is up to date as well. Software is released frequently. Ensure that your hardware firmware is up to date. Underlying in most hardware, there is some sort of software running the hardware components themselves. Get that hardware up to date with the latest versions of software and firmware. They will contain security fixes and updates, so making sure that your hardware is up to date from a firmware level is also very important. So there you've got an overview of hardware and infrastructure security recommendations. A lot of good foundational stuff that you can be putting in place. So apart from all of that, there's also a few good processes that you can be putting in place in your organization to ensure that things are running smoothly, to make sure that things are documented and understood in the event of disaster, in the event of data breaches, in the event of security risk. The first is a BCP, a business continuity plan. This is a document that outlines what happens to your business in the event of a disaster. What happens to HR? What happens to finance? What happens to your marketing department if a disaster was to happen? If your building is damaged, if it's flooded, if there's fire, if there's a cybersecurity risk, where do you meet? Does your business continue to operate at an alternate location? What do you do to be able to restore operations? You need to have a BCP. Along with the BCP is the DRP, the Disaster Recovery Plan. The DRP will focus primarily just on the technology component. It will work hand in hand with the BCP, but will focus on the IT systems, the backups, and what procedures you need to put in place to be able to restore operations. Who in your IT department is going to be involved? What third-party vendors, ISPs, you're going to be working with to be able to restore your IT technical systems to fully functional operations. Many security breaches are actually initiated from your staff themselves. The stats are that up to 40% of security breaches are actually done from your staff themselves doing something by accident or even intentionally. Staff education is imperative. Whether this is staff trained internally, whether they're sent off-site, whether if it's communicated via emails or internal meetings, get your staff trained up and aware of security concerns out in the IT and out in the business industries. So that was the last video in the series on security. I hope you found it helpful. We touched on a lot of different technologies, a lot of infrastructure. So I would recommend for you to go back and check out each of those 4 videos in the series on security, and hope you found it helpful, and we'll see you next time.